Yes, Susan Smith was a tyrant when it came to fighting for her clients, but it seemed to me that she was constantly in fight mode. Perhaps this was because she'd also been living with cancer for many years and was, in her words, a proud survivor. I told her I preferred the word thriver, and she sent a few obscenities my way. Survivors! Beep, beep, beep! Survivors! That's what we are! Susan certainly had a mouth on her. She swore like a sailor. Well, I know that's the expression, but I think it's unfair to compare her with these brave men of the sea. She could outswear them all any day of the week. Although we hardly knew each other, she trusted me to take care of her business while she was in New Zealand for 3 weeks. Because her computer skills were non-existent, I could only reach her by phone, but connecting was always an issue. Fortunately, there were no problems. It all went quite smoothly. But that's what she expected, and I didn't get any particular praise from her. I did, however, from her clients, so that was worth a lot. Whenever I arrived at her house, I was met with the sizzle and smell of frying steak. This was Susan's breakfast of champions. As a vegetarian, not only the taste, but the smell of meat disgusts me. So that was a challenge. There were many more, but I prefer not to go into detail. Only to say that she didn't create a positive environment for assistance. Consequently, it was an ever-revolving door as people fled. Apparently, one guy stayed 90 minutes. I managed 90 days. Some of her clients were disappointed that I decided to leave, and the wonderful, talented Brian Dennehy practically pleaded with me to stay. He said some very nice things about me and said that Susan needed someone like me and that I should please consider. Sadly, Brian died in 2020. Susan succumbed to cancer in 2013, 6 years after I worked for her. There was a Twitter feed where former assistants expressed a lot of negative remarks after her death. Her client, Linda Emond, defended her, and I agreed that Susan Smith had been a strong and domineering presence in the lives of the actors she represented. They were the children she never had, and she protected them with all her might. I just wish she hadn't been such an angry person, though. One day I got a call from Barry Levinson saying that he was going to be in Los Angeles the following day shooting a scene from What Just Happened, the script I'd worked on with him. It was going to be taking place on the very wide and impressive steps of Northridge College and was meant to represent a scene at the Cannes Film Festival. Barry wanted to know if I'd like to be a special extra. No dialogue. But I'd be placed behind Robert De Niro and the female lead, Catherine Keenan, as they walked down the steps of a supposedly fancy cinema, surrounded by lots of glamorous people. And me. I agreed to do it, of course. Why not? The wardrobe lady called me and asked if I had an evening dress. If not, they'd supply one for me. I told her I did, but immediately regretted it when I arrived on set and saw so many amazing gowns that other extras had obtained from the wardrobe department. My dress was nice, but because I was going to be right behind De Niro, I was sorry it wasn't a lot flashier. Actually, Catherine Keenan's dress was quite modest to fit with her character, so that made me feel a bit better. I checked in with the set PA, went through hair and makeup, and waited with the other extras to be called to descend the Cannes Festival stairs with the very nice, suitably attired gentleman chosen as my partner. It was a long wait. So in the meantime, I chatted with Barry while he was waiting for the scene to be set up. I also had a word with De Niro, who of course I'd met on Wag the Dog 10 years earlier. At that time, he was intrigued by the way I worked with Barry on scripts, and said maybe I could help him too. He never called, though, and to my knowledge, he's never written script. I passed on my regards to him from my friend Chuck Hirsch, who'd produced two of De Niro's very early films, Hi Mom and Greetings, which were both directed by Brian De Palma. Chuck was now a hypnotherapist, and we'd become friends after he'd helped me during my cancer experience. He told me to tell you that he owes you $300, I told Bob. He laughed. What's he doing these days? He was surprised to hear of Chuck's new career path. Really? I thought he'd be running a studio by now. Chuck was pleased to hear that, regardless of the path he'd chosen. Being an extra or background actor can be a thankless job, but the film and television industries couldn't survive without them. It is frowned upon, though, if extras approach the stars, and when I rejoined the group of glamorously attired background players, I was given that information by one of the experienced male extras. You know, you could get in trouble for speaking to Mr. De Niro. I just smiled and said, oh, it's okay. Later, when we finally began to get in position on the steps, Barry said, Marie and partner, you stand here, pointing to a step just behind the principals. That's when another extra said, who are you? It's not unusual for family members or friends of the stars, producers or director to be given small roles in films. So these extras probably thought it was a case of nepotism that I was there. As a matter of fact, Barry's son Sam played the role of De Niro's assistant in the film, and he was good. It was 3 a.m. by the time the scene began filming, 8 hours after I'd arrived. In our flimsy evening clothes, we were all cold because there wasn't a decent indoor holding area for the extras. And we were hungry because we hadn't had a meal break. Of course, the background players were very happy about that. Regardless of their hunger, this meant that they would get an overtime boost in their paycheck. Whoopee! Although, as mentioned, a movie couldn't get made without extras. It's a job I never want to do again. I've always tried to show respect for these essential players on the films I worked on as a casting director, but my admiration jumped up a notch when I put myself in their shoes. Literally, my feet were killing me in my high heels as we trundled up and down the steps behind De Niro and Catherine Keener. There was quite a bit of dialogue between them, so the scene took a while. We wrapped around 6:30, which was a lot better than the usual 12-hour days on a film set. I think it was 11 and a half hours. We were all so tired. After I left Susan Smith, I'd been approached by a couple of people about casting independent films. One was a film by a young Italian writer-director, Valerio Zanoli, called The Minutes. This was his first film, and a rather unlikely story about a basketball team of little people who enter a basketball tournament to try and win money to send one of the players' sons to college. They enlist the help of Dennis Rodman, a former NBA player who was notorious for his bad boy controversial antics. I won't tell you any more, but look him up if you want to know. He was a rather distasteful character, in my opinion, but apparently the director always had Dennis Rodman in mind when he was writing the script. He tried contacting him through the usual channels, and when that didn't work, he tracked Rodman down in Las Vegas. I think he said he pushed the script under the door of a men's toilet where Rodman was doing something and offered him a certain sum of money to be in the film. And Dennis probably wasn't sober at the time, since he was an alcoholic, but he agreed. So with Rodman locked in, so to speak, it was up to me to find little people who could not only act, but play basketball, which was easier said than done. I think Valerio had bitten off a little more than he could chew, offering Dennis Rodman the lead role. He was very unreliable and often didn't turn up to the set on the day of filming, so we had to shoot around him. To be honest, the whole production was a bit of a nightmare. There were financial problems and crew members hadn't been paid for 2 weeks. As a matter of fact, on the day we were filming at a school, and when Rodman actually did turn up, the crew threatened to walk if they didn't get paid. Valerio was in a major panic, but he managed to get money into the bank so the checks wouldn't bounce again. As one catastrophe was averted, soon there was another. The actress I'd hired to play the school principal was too sick to work that day. And since it was a Saturday, the agency said they didn't have anyone to replace her at the last minute. Consequently, I stepped in to play the role. Since we were filming in Venice and not too far from where I lived, I was able to rush home to get appropriate wardrobe. My scene was with Dennis Rodman, who's giving an inspirational talk to the school kids, except he's not really into it, as the character. And as Dennis Rodman, he really wasn't in it too. As the school principal, I have to whisper in his ear and feed him the words he's meant to be saying to inspire the kids. As soon as the scene was completed, Rodman was gone. Next time, casting a slasher movie and working with Al Pacino. Thanks again for listening.